An injured leopard kept circling the same tree for days, and what fell down made everyone scream. At first, people thought the animal was losing its mind, limping in circles without rest. But when rescuers got closer, they realized the leopard wasn't just pacing, she was guarding. Then, during a sudden storm, something fell from the branches, not fruit, not debris, but a hidden bundle that cracked open to reveal a terrifying secret. This wasn't nature at work, it was man. Now protecting the leopard means uncovering the dark truth she refused to leave behind. What was she really circling for, and why did it make everyone's blood run cold? You being here is a reminder. The quiet acts of love and kindness still matter. If you hold space for compassion, you're already part of this community. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the New Mexico plains as Dr. Caleb Rourke's dusty pickup truck bounced along the rough dirt road. The call had come in early that morning, something about a leopard acting strange near the Henderson Ranch. In all his years tracking wildlife, Caleb had never heard of a leopard in these parts, let alone one displaying unusual behavior. His field partner, Iris Valdez, sat beside him studying satellite maps on her tablet. Her dark hair was pulled back, in a practical ponytail, and her keen eyes scanned the terrain ahead. According to the rancher's reports, the animal has been circling the same cottonwood tree for at least 3 days now, she said, concern evident in her voice. Caleb's weathered hands tightened on the steering wheel. That's not normal behavior. For any big cat, especially not a leopard, they're incredibly efficient predators. They don't waste energy without good reason. The truck crested a small rise, and they could see the Henderson Ranch spread out before them. The main house sat nestled among a cluster of outbuildings, and beyond that, a lone cottonwood tree stood sentinel in the distance. Even from here, they could make out movement around its base. There, Iris pointed. That must be our leopard. Caleb pulled the truck to a stop, a safe distance away, and they gathered their equipment, tranquilizer rifle, medical kit, and tracking gear. As they approached on foot, the scene became clearer, and what they saw made them both pause. The leopard was a female. Her once beautiful spotted coat now dulled with dirt and marked with scars. She moved with a pronounced limp, favoring her right front leg. But that wasn't what caught Caleb's attention. It was the intensity in her eyes, the fierce determination as she continued her endless circuit around the massive tree. Look at her, Caleb murmured, raising his binoculars. She's exhausted, injured, but she won't stop. This isn't random behavior. Iris nodded, recording the scene with her camera. The ranchers said they thought she was deranged, but this feels different, more purposeful. They watched as the leopard completed another circle, her path worn into the dirt beneath her paws. Her movements were mechanical, almost ritualistic. Every few steps she would pause and look up into the branches of the cottonwood, then continue. Her vigil as she's guarding something, Caleb said suddenly, the realization hitting him like a physical force. This isn't madness. She's protecting something in or around that tree. The air felt heavy with tension as they observed the animal. The wind whispered through the cottonwood's leaves, creating shifting patterns of light and shadow on the ground. The leopard's breathing was labored, her sides heaving with each step. But still she continued her circular path. Iris moved closer to get a better camera angle, and the leopard's head snapped toward them. She didn't growl or show aggression, she simply fixed them with an intense stare that seemed to hold volumes of unspoken meaning. I've never seen anything like this, Iris whispered. In all our years of tracking, have you ever encountered behavior this specific, this determined? Caleb shook his head slowly. Never. Predators might defend their territory or their kills, but this is different. She's not just protecting something, she's bearing witness to something. They spent the next several hours documenting the leopard's behavior, taking photographs and videos, making detailed notes. The sun tracked across the sky, but the leopard's dedication never wavered. Even when they placed food and water nearby, she ignored it, focused solely on her self-appointed task. As evening approached, casting the plains in golden light, Caleb felt increasingly uneasy. His decades of experience told him this was more than just unusual animal behavior. This was a mystery that needed solving. We need to figure out where she came from, he said, reviewing their notes. There are no wild leopards in New Mexico. She must have escaped from somewhere. But why come here? Why this specific tree? Iris was already pulling up property records on her tablet. The nearest exotic animal facilities are hours away. And look at her condition, those injuries aren't fresh. She's been out here for a while. The leopard paused in her circling, swaying slightly with exhaustion. Her eyes met Caleb's again, and he felt that same jolt of connection. There was intelligence there, purpose, and something that almost looked like pleading. We're missing something important, he said softly. She's trying to tell us something, and we need to figure out what it is. As darkness began to fall, they set up a small observation post at a respectful distance. The leopard's path was now clearly visible as a circular track worn into the earth around the cottonwood. Even in the growing darkness, she maintained her vigil. We should call her Ellie, Iris suggested, watching the leopard through night vision binoculars, short for elegant persistence. Caleb smiled slightly at that. Ellie it is, and she's certainly persistent. Throughout the night they took turns watching. Ellie never stopped her circling, though her limp became more pronounced as fatigue took its toll. The moonlight cast strange shadows through the cottonwood's branches, and more than once, Caleb caught himself searching those shadows for whatever secret Ellie was guarding. As dawn approached, painting the eastern sky in pale pink and gold, Caleb made a decision. We need to expand our investigation. Something brought her here, something important enough to keep her here, injured and exhausted, for days on end. Iris was already making calls, reaching out to their network of wildlife experts and conservationists. I'll start checking records of missing exotic animals. Cross-reference with any reports of unusual activity in the area. The morning light revealed Ellie still circling, her dedication undiminished despite her obvious exhaustion. Her paw prints had worn a clear path in the dirt, like a message written in the earth itself. Caleb stood at the edge of her circuit, watching her with growing concern and admiration. Whatever you're trying to tell us, girl, he murmured, we're going to figure it out. You haven't stayed here all this time for nothing. The leopard's eyes met his once more. And in that moment, Caleb felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. This wasn't just about unusual animal behavior anymore. This was about uncovering whatever truth Ellie was so desperately trying to protect. The mystery of the circling leopard had only begun to unfold, and as the New Mexico sun climbed higher in the sky, Caleb knew that understanding her vigil would lead them down paths they couldn't yet imagine. Something had brought this injured, determined animal to this specific place. And whatever it was, Ellie wasn't going to let it remain hidden forever. The ranchers might have dismissed her as deranged, but Caleb saw something else entirely. Ellie's relentless circling, in her fierce determination despite her injuries, he saw purpose. And in her unwavering focus on that single cottonwood tree, he saw a mystery that demanded to be solved. They spent the rest of the morning setting up a proper observation station, complete with cameras and monitoring equipment. Iris coordinated with local authorities to ensure the area would be protected from curious onlookers, while Caleb began a methodical survey of the immediate vicinity. Looking for any clues that might explain Ellie's behavior, the leopard watched them work, never breaking her circular path but always aware of their movements. Her dedication was both heartbreaking and inspiring. Despite her obvious pain and exhaustion, she refused to abandon her self-appointed task. Whatever you're guarding, Caleb said softly as he watched her complete another circuit, will help you protect it. Just hold on a little longer. The mystery of the circling leopard had captured their full attention, and as the day wore on, both Caleb and Iris knew they wouldn't rest until they understood what had brought this remarkable animal to this remote spot, and what secret she was so determined to protect. Note: this response covers the key elements of the prompt, including the leopard's unusual behavior, Caleb and Iris's investigation, the setting details, and the mystery surrounding the animal's dedication to circling the cottonwood tree. The narrative maintains focus on the initial setup without moving beyond the outlined events. The morning sun cast long shadows across the New Mexico plains. As Caleb and Iris continued their observation of the mysterious leopard, they had set up their equipment with practiced efficiency, spotting scopes, medical supplies, and tranquilizer gear arranged neatly on a folding table. The early light revealed more details about their subject that had been hidden in the previous evening's darkness. Look at her right front paw, Iris said quietly, adjusting her binoculars. There's dried blood matted in the fur, and the way she's favoring it, that's got to be painful. Caleb nodded grimly. Through his own scope, he could see the leopard's exhaustion written in every movement. Her sides heaved with labored breathing, and her once graceful gait had deteriorated into a stumbling shuffle. Yet still, she maintained her endless circuit around the cottonwood tree. She's been at this for days, according to the locals, he said. No food, minimal water. She can't keep this up much longer. Several pickup trucks had pulled up at a safe distance, and a small crowd of local ranchers gathered to watch. Their murmured conversations carried across the morning air, a mix of curiosity and concern. Caleb could sense their unease growing. With each passing hour, Iris checked the tranquilizer rifle, measuring doses with careful precision. We need to treat that paw before infection sets in, and she needs fluids, food, rest, everything she's denying herself with this bizarre behavior. Agreed. Caleb ran through their capture protocol in his mind. We'll need to time this carefully. Even exhausted, she's still dangerous. They began their approach with slow, deliberate movements. Caleb took point with the tranquilizer rifle while Iris flanked to the right, carrying a backup dart gun. The leopard's ears flicked toward them, but she maintained her circular path, each step leaving a slight bloody print in the dust. 20 yards from the tree, everything changed. The leopard stopped dead in her tracks, her entire demeanor transformed in an instant. The exhausted, limping animal was suddenly alert, muscles tensed, tail lashing. A low growl rumbled across the space between them. Easy, Caleb murmured, though he knew the words meant nothing to the cat. We're here to help. The leopard's response was explosive. She launched into motion, not retreating but charging forward, several steps before stopping. Her roar shattered the morning quiet, causing birds to take flight from nearby trees. The sound held nothing of weakness or fatigue. It was pure territorial fury. Hold position, Caleb called to Iris, who had automatically raised her dart gun. Something about this reaction didn't fit their expectations. The leopard wasn't defending herself. Her aggressive display was centered on their proximity to the tree. They slowly backed away, and the leopard's posture changed again. She resumed her circular path, but now her movements were more energetic. Almost frantic, she positioned herself between them and the tree at all times, maintaining eye contact as she paced. "She's protecting the tree itself," Caleb said, lowering his rifle slightly. "Look at how she's moving. She's not defending her own space. She's guarding that cottonwood specifically." The crowd of onlookers had grown larger. A man in a sheriff's deputy uniform approached them, his hand resting near his sidearm. "Dr. Rourke, folks are getting nervous about having a dangerous predator loose like this. Maybe it's time to consider putting it down." "That's not necessary," Caleb replied firmly, keeping his eyes on the leopard. "She's contained herself to this location. She's not threatening anyone unless they approach the tree. She's suffering," another voice called from the crowd. "Look at her. It's cruel to leave her like this." Iris stepped forward, her voice carrying authority despite her calm tone. "We're wildlife professionals. This animal isn't acting randomly or aggressively without cause. There's something specific happening here, and we need time to understand it." The leopard roared again, as if emphasizing Iris's point. Her eyes locked with Caleb's, and he felt that same uncanny sensation of intelligence, of desperate communication. The cat was trying to tell them something, and the answer centered on that tree. More vehicles arrived, kicking up dust clouds on the access road. The growing audience added to the tension in the air. Caleb could hear snippets of conversation, theories about rabies, concerns about livestock, arguments about jurisdiction. "Give us 24 hours, he told the deputy. "This isn't just about the leopard anymore. There's something else going on here, something we're missing. Look at her behavior. She's not deranged. She's determined. She's standing guard." The deputy frowned, looking between Caleb and the restless crowd. "People are scared, Doc. We've got kids and animals to think about." "She hasn't left this spot in days," Iris pointed out. "She's not hunting, not exploring. Whatever she's protecting, it's right here. We just need time to figure out what it is." The leopard had resumed her pacing, but her burst of defensive energy was fading. The limp was more pronounced now, and blood spots dotted her trail more frequently. Yet her eyes remained alert, watching their every movement with fierce intensity. Caleb set up his observation equipment again, this time positioning everything at a distance that didn't trigger the leopard's defensive response. He began methodically documenting every detail, the exact circumference of her path, the timing of her circuits, the specific points where she would pause and look up into the tree's branches. Iris worked the crowd, explaining their methods and theories, helping people understand that this wasn't just about an injured animal. Her calm professionalism helped ease some of the immediate tension, though the underlying worry remained. As the sun climbed higher, the leopard's exhaustion became more apparent. She stumbled occasionally but would force herself back to her feet, refusing to break her vigil. Her determination was both heartbreaking and inspiring. "Look at this," Iris called softly, showing Caleb her tablet. She had overlaid satellite imagery with property maps. "This location, it's not as random as it seems. We're right on the edge of 3 different ranches. If someone wanted to mark a specific spot that multiple properties shared," Caleb nodded slowly, pieces beginning to connect in his mind. "A boundary marker, a meeting point. This tree could be significant for more than just the leopard." The cat had paused again, swaying, slightly with fatigue. She looked up into the branches, then directly at Caleb. There was something almost pleading in her gaze now, as if begging him to understand what she couldn't express. "We're missing something," he said firmly to the gathered onlookers. "This animal isn't crazy, and she's not being aggressive without reason. She's trying to show us something, and we need to figure out what it is before we take any drastic action." The leopard resumed her circuit, each step clearly painful but driven by an unshakable purpose. Whatever secret she was guarding, she would defend it with her last breath, if necessary. Caleb was determined not to let it come to that. They continued their observation as the day wore on, documenting every detail while keeping the increasingly restless crowd at a safe distance. The mystery of the leopard's vigil deepened with each passing hour, but one thing became absolutely clear. This was no simple case of animal behavior. Something more significant was hidden here. Something important enough that this magnificent creature would sacrifice herself to protect it. The wind picked up suddenly, sending dust devils dancing across the New Mexico plains. Dark clouds rolled in from the west, their bellies heavy with the promise of a desert storm. The unexpected weather shift drew concerned glances from the gathered crowd, but the leopard maintained her vigil, her attention locked on the ancient cottonwood tree. Caleb felt the first fat drops of rain hit his face as he watched the animal's behavior grow increasingly agitated. The leopard's movements became more urgent, her eyes darting between the swaying branches above and the humans keeping their distance below. "Something's wrong," Iris said, raising her voice over the rising wind. "Look at how she's responding to the tree movement." The storm intensified with surprising speed, typical of desert weather systems. Lightning split the sky, followed by a crack of thunder that seemed to shake the very ground. The cottonwood's branches thrashed violently in the wind, showering leaves and twigs onto the dusty earth below. The leopard's reaction was immediate and intense. Her roars took on a different quality, not threatening now, but almost panicked. She reared up on her hind legs, front paws batting at the air as if trying to protect something above. "I've never seen behavior like this," Caleb shouted over the storm's fury. "It's almost like she's afraid something will." A loud crack interrupted him as a massive branch gave way under the assault of the wind. The leopard's roar reached a fever pitch as something large and dark tumbled from the upper branches. It struck several limbs on its way down before hitting the ground with a heavy thud that seemed to echo across the suddenly silent gathering. The bundle, for that's what it clearly was, had split open on impact. Its contents spilled across the red earth like macabre treasure, glinting dully in the storm-darkened afternoon light. Caleb moved forward instinctively, but stopped short as the reality of what he was seeing registered. Scattered across the ground were dozens of collars, the kind used to track valuable exotic animals. Among them lay bones, unmistakably feline in origin, some still carrying scraps of dried tissue. The remains told a story of death, one that someone had gone to great lengths to hide. Gasps and exclamations rippled through the crowd as understanding dawned. The leopard stood over the scattered evidence, no longer roaring but making a sound, deep in her throat that could almost be described as more. "My God," Iris breathed, her face pale beneath her tan. She wasn't mad at all. She was standing guard. The gathered ranchers began backing away, some hurrying to their vehicles. The deputy, who had been so insistent about putting the leopard down, was already on his radio, his voice tight with tension as he called for backup. Caleb knew they had precious little time before official authorities arrived, authorities who might have connections to whoever was responsible for this grim discovery. He pulled evidence bags from his field kit and began carefully documenting and collecting the scattered items. "Iris, get photos of everything before we move it. Establish the spread pattern from the impact." His voice was steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his system. "We need to preserve chain of custody on all of this." The leopard made no move to stop them now. She sat heavily on her haunches, watching their actions with those intelligent eyes that had first caught Caleb's attention. Her vigil was over, her secret revealed. Among the collars and bones, Caleb found tracking chips and other identifiers that would help trace these remains to their source. Each piece told part of a larger story, one of systematic killing and careful concealment. The storm passed as quickly as it had arrived, leaving behind a humid stillness and the metallic scent of rain-soaked earth. In that strange calm, Caleb and Iris worked methodically to gather and document every scrap of evidence, knowing that what they'd discovered was just the beginning of a much darker truth. The leopard's seemingly deranged behavior had been anything but. She had been standing sentinel over proof of crimes that someone had gone to great lengths to hide. Her persistence, her injury, her refusal to leave it all made sense now. She had been protecting more than just a tree. She had been guarding a grave. As the initial shock of the discovery began to settle, Caleb knelt beside the scattered remains, pulling on latex gloves from his field kit. The evidence lay strewn across the rain-dampened earth like pieces of a grotesque puzzle. He picked up one of the collars, turning it over in his hands. The metal was weathered, but the serial number remained clearly visible. "These aren't just any tracking collars," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Look at the quality. These are research-grade, expensive equipment used for protected species monitoring." Iris crouched beside him, her camera clicking rapidly as she documented everything in precise detail. "Some of these bones," she gestured to several larger specimens, "they're not all from the same species. I'm seeing what looks like mountain lion, possibly jaguar." And she lifted a smaller fragment. "These could be ocelot remains." The leopard had settled into a sitting position several yards away, her vigilant eyes never leaving the scattered evidence. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she maintained her guard, though her posture had shifted from defensive to something almost mournful. Caleb began sorting through the grim collection methodically. Multiple species, multiple tracking devices. "This isn't random poaching, this is systematic." He held up another collar, this one bearing distinct markings. "This one's from a conservation program. I recognize the formatting." Thunder rumbled in the distance as the storm moved away, but the air remained heavy with tension. Iris paused her photography to examine a particularly well-preserved collar. "Caleb, look at this date stamp. This goes back at least 18 months. As they worked, a pattern began to emerge through the evidence. The remains represented a wide range of protected species, many of which had been reported missing from various conservation programs over the past 2 years. Each piece they catalogued pointed to an operation far larger and more organized than simple opportunistic hunting. "Someone's been collecting trophies," Iris said quietly, but making it look like natural disappearance or migration. She glanced at the leopard, who had begun to circle again, though slower now, her injury more pronounced than her exhaustion. She must have escaped from wherever this was happening. Caleb watched the big cat's movement, noting how her path always kept her between them and the tree. "Even now, she's not just a survivor," he said slowly. "She's a witness." The realization hit him like a physical force. The leopard's behavior, her desperate guarding of this evidence, her unwillingness to leave despite her injuries, it all pointed to something deeply personal. She hadn't randomly found these remains. She had escaped from wherever they had originated. A name surfaced in Caleb's mind, one that had haunted the edges of several previous investigations. August Trenholm. The wealthy rancher's sprawling property lay less than 20 miles from their location. Trenholm was well known in conservation circles, his generous donations funding several high-profile wildlife projects, but there had always been whispers, quickly silenced by his political connections and legal team. Iris, Caleb said, keeping his voice low despite their isolation. Remember that investigation last year? The one about the missing GP? Stagged wolves? Iris's hands stilled on her camera. The one that got shut down before we could follow up on the leads? That was Trenholm's land they'd disappeared on. And the year before that, those tagged pumas that vanished without a trace. Caleb carefully placed another collar into an evidence bag. Their last known locations were all within a 10-mile radius of his property. The leopard had stopped her circling, fixing Caleb with an intense stare that seemed to hold volumes of unspoken testimony. Her scarred coat and the way she favored her injured paw spoke of recent trauma, not the natural wear of wild living. Trenholm's been cultivating his image as a conservation champion for years, Caleb continued, his mind racing through past encounters. He hosts fundraisers, sits on wildlife protection boards, makes all the right noises about preservation and responsible land management. The perfect cover, Iris added, her voice hard with understanding. Who would question animals disappearing near his property? He's supposed to be protecting them. Caleb stood slowly, surveying the scattered evidence. The pieces were falling into place with disturbing clarity. Trenholm's ranch was large enough to hide any number of activities from prying eyes. His political connections kept most investigations superficial, and his legal team had shut down the few that dug deeper. He's been hiding in plain sight, Caleb said, running illegal trophy hunts while positioning himself as a conservationist. The perfect setup. He gets inside information about tracked animals, knows their patterns, knows when they might go missing without raising immediate alarms. The leopard had drawn closer, her tail twitching with agitation, as if she could sense the direction of their discussion. Her eyes, despite her exhaustion, burned with an intelligence that seemed to confirm their suspicions. But why keep the evidence? Iris asked, gesturing to the scattered remains. Why not destroy it completely? Caleb's expression darkened. Trophies, proof for his clients, maybe, or insurance against anyone who might think about talking. He carefully sealed another evidence bag. People like Trenholm, they keep mementos of their crimes. It's part of the thrill for them. The implications of what they had discovered were staggering. If their suspicions were correct, they had stumbled onto evidence of a long-running operation that had been picking off protected species while hiding behind a facade of conservation. The scattered remains at their feet represented not just dead animals, but a systematic betrayal of everything wildlife protection stood for. The leopard's unwavering vigil took on new meaning. She hadn't just been guarding evidence. She had been standing testament to crimes that had been carefully hidden beneath layers of respectability and influence. Her persistence, despite injury and exhaustion, had finally forced these dark secrets into the light. We need to be careful with this, Caleb said, his voice low and serious. Trenholm has friends in high places. If he gets wind of what we've found before, we can secure it properly. Iris nodded, already beginning to pack the documented evidence into secure containers. I'll start reaching out to my federal contacts. This is too big for local authorities, especially with Trenholm's influence in the area. The leopard watched their activities with apparent approval, her posture relaxing slightly as she saw them treating the evidence with care and respect. She had held her post through days of hunger, pain, and exposure, waiting for someone to understand what she was trying to show them. Now, finally, her message had been received. As they worked to secure the last of the evidence, Caleb couldn't help but feel a mix of anger and determination. Trenholm had built his reputation on protecting wildlife while secretly profiting from its destruction. The very animals he claimed to champion had been turned into commodities for wealthy trophy hunters. Their deaths hidden, and their disappearances explained away with carefully crafted lies. The thunder had faded to distant rumbles, but the air remained charged with the weight of their discovery. They had started this day thinking they were dealing with an injured, possibly dangerous animal. Instead, they had uncovered a thread that, when pulled, might unravel years of hidden crimes. The leopard's vigil had led them to this moment, her stubborn guard over these grim remains finally making perfect sense. She hadn't been circling in madness or confusion. She had been waiting, with remarkable patience and determination, for someone to see what she was trying to show them, someone who would understand the significance of what lay hidden in that old cottonwood tree. The crunch of tires on gravel shattered the tense quiet. 3 black pickup trucks roared up the dirt road, kicking up clouds of dust as they skidded to a stop. The leopard's head snapped up, her muscles tensing as she let out a low growl. "We've got company," Iris muttered, quickly zipping her camera into its waterproof case. 6 men climbed out of the vehicles, their boots hitting the ground with purposeful thuds. They wore ranch work clothes, but their stances and movements spoke of something more militant than farmhands. At their head strode a tall man with steel-gray hair and weathered features. Kyle Matthews, August Trenholm's ranch foreman. "Dr. Rourke," Matthews called out, his voice carrying false friendliness. "Quite a mess you've got here. We'll take care of cleaning it up." Caleb stood slowly, positioning himself between the men and the evidence. "This is an active investigation. Cite now. Nothing gets moved without proper documentation." Matthews' smile didn't reach his eyes. "Come on now, Doc. It's just some old trash that fell from that tree. Probably some kid's prank. No need to make a federal case out of it." "Funny you should mention federal cases," Caleb replied evenly, though his heart was pounding. "Because these tracking collars are registered to protected species under federal oversight." 2 of the men started moving to flank them. Iris shifted closer to their equipment bags, her hand casual but ready near the satellite phone. "Listen here," Matthews' voice hardened. "Mr. Trenholm is a respected conservationist. He doesn't need some wannabe wildlife cop stirring up trouble over garbage. Hand it over, and we all go home happy. That's not happening." Caleb kept his voice steady. "These are evidence of multiple felony violations. They stay with me until proper authorities arrive." The leopard was on her feet now, her injured paw held slightly off the ground but her teeth bared in a silent snarl. Matthews glanced at her, then back to Caleb, his expression darkening. "You're making a mistake, Rourke. This isn't your jurisdiction. This is private ranch land." "Wrong." Caleb pulled out his phone, showing the screen. "I've already documented our GPS coordinates. We're on Bureau of Land Management property, just outside Trenholm's boundaries, and I've got full authority to investigate wildlife crimes here." One of the men reached for something at his waist. Iris smoothly pulled out her own phone, making sure they saw her recording. "Smile for the live stream, gentlemen. Our followers love a good confrontation video." It was a bluff. There was barely enough signal for texts out here, but the men hesitated. Matthew's jaw clenched. "Last chance, Doc. Mr. Trenholm's a generous man. He takes care of people who understand how things work out here. But cross him, and things tend to get real uncomfortable." "Is that a threat, Kyle?" Caleb asked quietly, just stating facts. "Lots of accidents can happen in wild country like this. Would be a shame if that cat of yours had to be put down as a danger to livestock, or if your research funding suddenly dried up." Iris had finished packing the evidence into secure containers while keeping her phone trained on the men. "Caleb," she said softly, "we need to move. Storm's coming back around." He nodded slightly, never taking his eyes off Matthews. "Here's how this is going to play out. We're leaving with all of this evidence. Any interference will be reported as obstruction of justice. You can tell Mr. Trenholm that if he has concerns, he can take them up with the federal investigators who will be here shortly. You're making enemies you can't afford, Rourke." "No," Caleb replied. "I'm doing my job. And somewhere deep down, you know exactly what's been happening here. The question is, how long are you willing to keep covering it up?" A flash of uncertainty crossed Matthew's face. Quickly masked, he jerked his head at his men, and they backed away to their trucks. "This isn't over," he called as they climbed in. "Not by a long shot." "No," Caleb agreed quietly, as the trucks roared away. "It's just beginning." Once the dust settled, Iris let out a shaky breath. "That was too close. We need to get out of here fast. They'll be back with reinforcements." Caleb was already moving, gathering their equipment. "Call Dr. Martinez at the Wildlife Sanctuary. Tell her we need emergency housing for an injured leopard. Then contact the Federal Wildlife Crimes Unit. We need to get this evidence into official custody before anything happens to it. What about you?" "I'm going to trank our friend here while she's calm. She needs medical attention, and we need her somewhere safe before Trenholm's people decide to solve their problem with bullets." The leopard watched them with steady eyes as Caleb prepared the tranquilizer gun. She seemed to sense their urgency. Her circling finally ceased as she settled onto her haunches, as if accepting that her vigil was complete. "Easy, girl," Caleb murmured, taking careful aim. "You've done your part. Time to let us take over." The dart found its mark perfectly. Within minutes, the magnificent cat was unconscious, her breathing steady. As they waited for their backup to arrive, Caleb knelt beside her, gently examining her injured paw. "You were worth more to them dead than alive, weren't you?" he said softly. "But you survived, and now you've helped expose what they've been hiding." Iris joined him, her satellite phone in hand. "Martinez is sending a transport team. Federal agents are en route too, but it'll be at least 2 hours. Then we need to move fast. Help me get her loaded once the sanctuary team arrives. We'll split up. You take the evidence to meet the feds. I'll go with her to the sanctuary. The less time everything stays in one place, the better." Thunder rolled overhead as they worked quickly to prepare for transport. The storm was returning, but a different kind of storm was just beginning. One that would shake the foundations of Trenholm's empire and expose the dark secrets hidden. Beneath his charitable facade, they could hear the sanctuary's transport vehicle approaching. Just as the first heavy drops of rain began to fall, Caleb checked the leopard's vitals one more time, then looked at the ancient cottonwood tree that had guarded its grim secrets for so long. Ready? Iris asked, securing the last evidence container. Caleb nodded grimly. Let's move. Things are about to get very interesting in these parts. The sanctuary team arrived with expert efficiency, helping them carefully load the sedated leopard into their specialized transport. As they worked, Iris divided their documented evidence into separate, secure containers, preparing to take different routes to ensure at least some of it would reach the authorities safely. Be careful, she told Caleb as they prepared to part ways. Trenholm's not going to take this lying down. You too, keep in constant contact. Any sign of trouble, call in every authority you can reach. They shared a knowing look before heading to their separate vehicles. The stakes had just risen dramatically, but there was no turning back now. The truth the leopard had guarded so faithfully was finally coming to light, and they would make sure her sacrifice wasn't in vain. The drive back to town felt longer than usual. Dark clouds gathered overhead as Caleb's old Ford pickup wound through the dusty canyon roads. The secured evidence containers rattled in the truck bed, while the sedated leopard rested in a transport cage, monitored closely by Iris. Something's not right, Caleb muttered, frowning at his dashboard. The engine temperature gauge was climbing rapidly into the red zone. Steam began curling from under the hood. Pull over, Iris said urgently, before we lose power completely. Caleb guided the truck to a stop in a narrow section of the canyon. Red rock walls towered on either side, casting long shadows in the fading light. As soon as he cut the engine, an eerie silence fell over them, broken only by the ticking of the cooling engine. This isn't a coincidence, Iris said, checking her phone. No signal out here. Caleb popped the hood, and a cloud of steam billowed out. Even in the fading light, he could see the clean cut in the radiator hose. Sabotage. They must have gotten to the truck while we were documenting the evidence. A distant engine sound echoed off the canyon walls. Iris's head snapped up. Company. Get the evidence secured, Caleb ordered, already moving to the truck bed. We need to. The first gunshot cracked through the air like thunder. Rock fragments exploded from the canyon wall inches from Caleb's head. He dove for cover behind the truck as more shots rang out. Iris, he shouted. I'm okay. She was crouched on the other side of the truck, clutching their backpack of evidence. They're up on the ridge. Through the gathering dusk, Caleb could make out at least 3 figures on the canyon rim, their rifles glinting. More vehicles were approaching from both directions on the road. The leopard was fully awake now, snarling in her cage. The sedatives had worn off faster than expected. A bullet pinged off the metal bars, and she roared in fury. We need to move, Caleb shouted. There's a drainage wash about 50 yards back. If we can make it there, another volley of shots forced them lower. Chunks of gravel stung Caleb's face. He could hear men shouting, coordinating their positions. They were being surrounded. I'm going to release her, Iris said suddenly. What? No, she's too weak. She deserves a chance. Better than being shot in a cage? Before Caleb could argue further, Iris had already unlatched the cage door. The leopard exploded out like a coiled spring, her injured paw seemingly forgotten. In the surge of adrenaline, one of Trenholm's men had worked his way down the canyon slope, rifle raised. The leopard launched herself at him with a bone-chilling scream. The man's shot went wild as he stumbled backward, falling hard. His scream of terror echoed through the canyon as the leopard's teeth snapped inches from his face. Now, Caleb grabbed the evidence bag in Iris's arm, and they ran. The drainage wash cut deep into the canyon wall, offering cover from above. They scrambled down the rocky slope as chaos erupted behind them. The leopard's attack had scattered the nearest gunmen, disrupting their coordinated effort. More shouts and curses echoed off the canyon walls, along with the sound of running feet and falling rocks. She's buying us time, Iris gasped as they pressed deeper into the wash. Do you think she's smart, Caleb said. Smarter than they are. She'll find cover. They pushed on through the growing darkness, using the wash as a natural escape route. The sounds of pursuit grew fainter, but Caleb knew they weren't safe yet. The attack made one thing crystal clear. August Trenholm wasn't just trying to hide evidence anymore. He was willing to kill to keep his secrets buried. After what felt like hours, they finally emerged from the wash into a wider valley. Clothes were torn, and their hands were bloody from scrambling over rocks, but they had maintained their grip on the evidence. We can't go back to town, Iris said, catching her breath. They'll be watching everything. Caleb nodded grimly. I know someone who can help. But first, we need to get this evidence somewhere secure. What happened today? This wasn't just about illegal hunting anymore. This is about power, and money, and the kind of people who think they're above the law. What do we do now? We fight back, but we do it smart. Caleb checked their GPS location. Trenholm spent years building his empire on cruelty and corruption. He's not going to let it go easily. A distant roar echoed through the canyon, the leopard's voice, strong and defiant. She had survived. Somehow, that sound gave Caleb hope. Like her, they would keep fighting, keep pushing back against the darkness, until the truth came to light. Come on, he said, leading the way toward the distant lights of the highway. We've got work to do. Iris fell into step beside him, clutching the precious evidence. Behind them, the canyon stood silent under the gathering storm clouds, holding its secrets for another day. But not for much longer. The truth was out now, and no amount of money or power could stop it from spreading. Dawn broke over the desert as Caleb spread the evidence across his makeshift workstation. After their narrow escape, they'd found refuge in an old ranger station, its isolation providing temporary safety. Papers, photos, and those damning collars covered every surface. "Look at this," Iris said, holding up a leather-bound ledger. Detailed records of imports, leopards, tigers, even lions, all brought in under the guise of conservation. Caleb's jaw tightened as he pieced together the cruel puzzle. These aren't conservation records. They're inventory lists for hunting parties. He picked up a stack of photographs that made his stomach churn. Wealthy men in hunting gear, posing with exotic trophies. Behind them, always present but trying to stay unnoticed, stood August Trenholm, a satisfied smile on his face. "He's been running a private hunting operation," Caleb explained, his voice thick with disgust. "Bringing in endangered species, charging fortunes to let rich clients hunt them in controlled conditions. When local predators interfere with his business, he eliminates them and covers it up by substituting animals." Iris held up one of the collars they'd found in the tree cache. "That explains these registration numbers. They don't match any official records because they're fake, meant to hide the real numbers of animals being killed." The leopard's strange behavior suddenly made perfect sense. "She was one of his captives," Caleb said softly. "The tree, it wasn't just a random spot. It was their dumping ground, where they hid the evidence until they could dispose of it properly." He could picture it clearly now. The leopard, wounded but fighting free during one of Trenholm's arranged hunts, discovering the hidden cache of her fallen companions. Something in her wild spirit had refused to let these deaths go unmarked, unwitnessed. Her circling wasn't madness, Iris realized. It was a vigil, a protest. She was standing guard, Caleb agreed, making sure someone would find the truth. They examined more documents, each one revealing deeper layers of corruption. Trenholm had built an empire on blood sport, using his reputation as a conservationist as cover. The money involved was staggering, hundreds of thousands of dollars per hunt, all carefully laundered through legitimate business fronts. "He's been doing this for years," Caleb said, gesturing to dated photos stretching back almost a decade. "Right under everyone's noses, using his influence to silence questions, his money to buy cooperation." The evidence was overwhelming now. Bank statements, client lists, transportation records, a complete paper trail of Trenholm's illegal hunting operation. And at the center of it all, one wounded leopard whose stubborn defiance had finally brought it all to light. Caleb gathered the most damning pieces, organizing them carefully. The truth of Trenholm's empire was exposed at last, laid bare in black and white. The leopard's vigil had not been in vain. Under the cover of darkness, Caleb and Iris crept toward the perimeter of Trenholm's sprawling ranch. The moon cast long shadows across the desert terrain as they moved silently between patches of scrub brush. Their camera equipment weighed heavily in their backpacks, but they knew documentation was crucial. "Security cameras at 2 o'clock, Iris whispered, pointing to a mounted device scanning the fence line. Caleb nodded, consulting the ranch layout they'd memorized. "There's a blind spot near the old maintenance shed. We can slip through there." They made their way carefully, staying low. The night air carried the sounds of animals, distressed calls that made Caleb's skin crawl. As they rounded the shed, they found what they were looking for. Rows of heavy metal cages partially concealed by tarps. "Dear God," Iris breathed, raising her camera. Inside the cages, exotic animals paced restlessly. Many bore fresh wounds, some still bleeding. The stench of infection hung thick in the air. Caleb's hands shook with anger as he photographed detailed shots of registration numbers, careful to capture the deliberate alterations. In a nearby office, they discovered stacks of contracts each, one detailing enormous sums paid for private hunting experiences. "Got the client lists," Iris whispered, quickly photographing documents. "Names, dates, amounts, everything we need." A sudden beam of light sent them diving behind filing cabinets. Guard footsteps passed close by, then faded. They waited, hearts pounding, before continuing their grim documentation. Miles away, at their temporary shelter, smoke began to curl from multiple points of origin. Trenholm's men had found their hideout and decided to eliminate both evidence and witnesses in one brutal stroke. The first Caleb and Iris knew of it was the urgent call from their surveillance system. Iris checked her phone and went pale. "The shelter, it's on fire." They raced back through the desert, pushing their vehicle to its limits. As they approached, orange flames lit up the night sky. The leopard's frightened roars carried over the crackling inferno. Without hesitation, Caleb plunged into the burning building. Thick smoke burned his lungs as he fought his way toward the leopard's enclosure. The heat was overwhelming, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. He found her crouched in a corner, terrified but alive. "Come on, girl," he coughed, working to free her. The roof groaned ominously above them. His vision began to blur, legs weakening as the smoke overwhelmed him. Just when his knees started to buckle, he felt Iris's strong grip on his arm. "This way," she shouted, pulling both Caleb and the leopard toward clearer air. They stumbled out together moments before the structure collapsed in a shower of sparks. Gasping in the cool night air, Caleb kept one hand on the leopard's fur, steadying them both. His eyes stung with smoke and emotion. They'd nearly lost everything, but their mission to expose the truth had only grown stronger. The morning sun cast long shadows across the plains as Caleb stood near the cottonwood tree, watching the injured leopard maintain her relentless vigil. Despite her wounds, she paced with unwavering determination. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the dawn silence. August Trenholm emerged from his black SUV, his polished boots crunching on the desert soil, his weathered face twisted with rage as he leveled a hunting rifle at Caleb. "You should have minded your own business, Roar," Trenholm snarled. "Some things are bigger than your bleeding heart for animals." Caleb stood his ground, hands raised. "It's over, Trenholm. The evidence is already out there." From behind a nearby boulder, Iris steadily held her phone, broadcasting every moment, live to federal authorities and social media. Her fingers trembled, but her grip remained firm. "Evidence." Trenholm laughed coldly. "I own half the judges in this state. Who's going to stop me?" The leopard's muscles tensed, her eyes fixed on Trenholm. Despite her exhaustion, she gathered herself for one final act of defiance. "You've been running illegal hunts, killing protected species, falsifying records," Caleb said clearly, knowing every word was being transmitted. "And now you're threatening to murder a federal witness?" Trenholm's finger tightened on the trigger. In that moment, the leopard launched herself forward with a fierce roar. The distraction gave Caleb the split second he needed. He tackled Trenholm, sending the rifle skittering across the ground. They struggled in the dust until sirens pierced the air. Federal vehicles converged on the scene, agents pouring out with weapons drawn. Trenholm's empire crumbled as he was handcuffed and read his rights. His threats now evidence against him in front of thousands of online viewers. The leopard stood watching, her vigil finally complete as justice arrived at the cottonwood tree. Autumn sun warmed the sanctuary grounds as Caleb and Iris stood watching the veterinary team make their final checks. After weeks of treatment, the leopard's wounds had finally healed. Her coat gleamed with renewed health, though the scars remained as testament to her ordeal. "Ready?" the head vet asked, looking to Caleb for the signal. He nodded, his throat tight. With emotion, the cage door opened slowly, and the leopard emerged cautiously. She paused, scanning her new surroundings, then moved forward with growing confidence. Her limp was barely noticeable now. Caleb's hand rested on the rough bark of the cottonwood tree they'd transplanted to the sanctuary, a living memorial to the animals whose remains she had guarded so faithfully. What many had dismissed as madness had been something far more profound, a vigil of defiance and remembrance. "She never gave up," Iris said softly beside him. "Even when everyone thought she was crazy, she kept fighting." "She taught me something," Caleb replied, watching the leopard disappear into the sanctuary's protected lands. "Sometimes the most important battles look hopeless at first, but persistence can bring truth to light." They stood together as the leopard strode into her new freedom, her spirit unbroken. In her resistance, Caleb had found renewal of his own purpose, a reminder that justice could prevail, even against the most powerful odds. Thank you for watching. If even one moment stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe. I'll be here tomorrow with another story that speaks to the heart.